There are two important meetings. The Eurogroup is gathering here in Luxembourg, but of course the focus is very much on the European Central Bank, which has now seen increasing interest rates by 25 basis points to 2.25%. Obviously, this is a scenario in which growth for the European economy has been dented because of this war, but also you are seeing this operational for both banks, but also consumer interest rate environment going up. And to debrief, I'm happy to say we're joined by the head of the Eurogroup, Kyriakos, Pierrakakis, also, of course, Greek finance minister. Sir, the European Central Bank will increase interest rates. That is very much what financial markets are expecting. I know you're not going to comment on the European Central Bank. There's independence, but is that going to make your life more difficult if we see this higher interest rate environment?
Good morning from Luxembourg. Good morning to your viewers. Let me begin by saying that, as you suggested, the European Ministers of Finance do not comment upon monetary policy. We trust the ECB to fulfill its role to anchor inflation expectations, which it must. And at the same time, what we do know is that we should do fiscal policy. We should implement policies that do not contradict monetary policy. We need to have orchestrated policies that optimally support citizens. We know that inflation right now is a challenge. We know that growth is at the same time a challenge. And we're trying to optimally target our policies to protect the most vulnerable, while also investing in our long-term needs, especially with regards to energy and energy infrastructural investments.
And you made a crucial point on this, because the European Central Bank is increasing interest rates, because inflation once again went up in May. A lot of that is driven by energy, but your policy should not make it worse, and it should not contradict it. So on the fiscal side of things, how are you going to help households and Europeans with those bills, but at the same time keeping that inflation pressure lower? How's that?
We know that we should be doing effectively three things at once, which makes the situation even more challenging. On the one hand, you need to support the most vulnerable households that are most in need. Second, you should be fiscally prudent, because we know that the fiscal situation, compared to what it was in 2022, is actually now more challenging. And the third point is that what you do in the long run should fit what you do in the short run. And when we invest in energy, we're effectively investing in the long run sovereignty capabilities and needs of the European Union as a whole. What do we know? We know that the investments that we made since 2022 as Europeans enabled us to feel the crisis, as the IMF calculates, by 12% less compared to what we would have had we not made the requisite investments. So what is the Commission proposing? They are proposing extra fiscal flexibility with regards to investments in energy infrastructure.
And how is that going to play in? Because you know very well your Italian colleague, representing the government of Giorgia Meloni, will say today Italy still wants to see more flexibility on energy. Whatever they spend on energy, they don't want that included in debt and deficit calculations. Is the Eurogroup open to that suggestions? Because the Italians are making it very clear they need help on energy.
Let me make first 2 points. When we had the escape clause for defense, we knew that investments in defense are about Europe's freedom. Investments in energy are about Europe's economic independence. And what do we know? We know that the best social policy is to actually lower energy prices in the long run, not only doing a short-run fix, a quick fix to address the current needs that we have in front of us. So in this regard, what the Commission is proposing, which is some extra flexibility to accommodate for investments in energy, I think constitutes a very targeted and a very fair approach, a very fair proposal, and this is exactly what we're going to be discussing today.
The Italians, however, continue to say it will not be enough. This is a very serious situation. Measures should be implemented now in order to stop a recession. Nonetheless, that recession has not happened. That worst-case scenario of flights who maybe could not even take off over summer has not happened yet. What is your outlook? How do you see this European economy performing in a very difficult scenario, but not in a catastrophic scenario yet?
Well, let me put it this way. Our work is to render Europe more resilient. So in this regard, what do we know? We know that we're not in the worst-case scenario, as you suggested, but we also know that we're not in the best-case scenario. We're in a challenging situation. So what has the Commission proposed? Targeted measures, measures that are temporary, targeted, and tailored in order to support the most vulnerable and those in need. At the same time, what do we know? We know that investments in energy, as I mentioned before, effectively make the European Union, the energy union, more resilient, and at the end of the day, they constitute the most productive and the most effective social policy.
Just quick, but
so we're going to be discussing this today.
But you don't see a recession happening. You don't see a big economic downturn. You think the worst has been avoided.
Well, let me put it this way. We are closely monitoring the situation. We know that the numbers have been adapted, they have been updated, inflation upwards, growth downwards. Are we in a stagflationary tendency? We are, but we're not in stagflation. So we're going to monitor the situation. The Commission overall is adapting its proposals contextually, so the situation has changed, and this is why the Commission has proposed this extra fiscal flexibility with regards to energy investments. So we're going to monitor, we're going to discuss. There are different viewpoints at the table. I've said this publicly, and we're going to try to do our best.
And just a final minute on this matter. The head of the IMF will also be participating in the talks. The IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, she has said she's in favor of common debt for common European projects. That would be good for Europe. How's that conversation going along? Is that something you can support? More joint borrowing?
Let me put it this way. We already had the IMF join our discussions. I mentioned before this calculation about 12% less impact because of what we did. This is an IMF calculation with regards to energy. I had the privilege of meeting Kristalina Georgieva yesterday with my other hat, that of the Greek Minister of Finance. And if I may make a quick point, I think it's quite symbolic to see my country, Greece, from a country that was a participant in an IMF-led program to now be a contributor of technical know-how for the Southeastern Europe Technical Assistance Center in the region. So the work of the IMF, I think, is quite pertinent to support the work that we as European Ministers of Finance are trying to do. We're going to be discussing all of those issues at the Eurogroup. Obviously, as you know, my work as President of the Eurogroup is to speak about what we all agree upon at the same time. On that very topic, there are different viewpoints, but certainly there isn't an issue that we're not planning to discuss.
Well, Minister, thank you so much. And the head of the Eurogroup, of course, his job is to find consensus, but at this point, Maven, you alluded to this, budget talks will begin. The conversation about Eurobonds certainly has not died. It's a difficult job to find consensus on this matter.